Holy Happy Hour, Batman. I'm Father Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest, gamer, streamer, podcast host, and co-founder of the All Ports Open network. On this show, Holy Happy Hour, Batman, I'm joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about life, faith, spirituality, and whatever else comes up. If you missed last week's Double Shot episode, we did a special double episode. It was headlined by none other than James D'Amato, the president of the One Shot Network and the host of One Shot and Campaign podcasts. You can head over to allportsopen.com, or you can head to my YouTube, That Gamer Priest on YouTube, my YouTube channel, where you can watch that episode and all of the past episodes of Holy Happy Hour Batman. Last week, James and I talked for actually over 2.5 hours about the campaign Skyjack's lore. He took questions from the audience. It was awesome. I'm hugely grateful to James for coming on the show. Check it out if you missed it. Again, go to allportsopen.com. You can watch all of the past episodes of the show. And you can see James answer questions about Skyjack's lore. So, really cool. So, tonight on this episode, I am going to be joined by two very special guests. Gabrielle Rabinowitz and Ben Bisogno will be joining us to discuss, among other things, their game, Ma Nishtana. Why is this night different? A game modeled on a Passover Seder, a ritual meal, and collaborative retelling of the Jewish exodus from Egypt. Before I bring them on the show, I wanted to share with you all this week's cocktail recipe. The other thing I do on Holy Happy Hour is I share cocktail recipes, usually inspired by my guests or some work that they've created or something adjacent at least to them. And I thought long and hard about this last week because I wanted to be as respectful as possible to the spirit of Passover when I was making some sort of cocktail for tonight's show. So I actually found a website called sippingseder.com, which has a number of Passover-inspired drink recipes. And I sort of read through those, read a lot of things on that website, and I was inspired to make this cocktail. So tonight, I'm going to bring up the recipe on the screen here. I think I am. Oh, hold on one second. Let's see. Yep, there we go. So tonight, I'm going to share with you this cocktail recipe that I made called The Bitterness You Have Known, which was inspired by both the Seder-inspired drinks at Sipping Seder, as well as just sort of some personal inspiration. So this is a distillery called Boardroom Spirits in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, which is not far from where I live, that makes a beet spirit, basically what amounts to a beet vodka. And it's earthy and bitter and delicious. So I used that as the basis of this cocktail recipe, along with muddled beets. If you wanted to, you could also muddle in a little bit of horseradish. So that's this week's cocktail recipe. I'll post it on the All Ports Open Network Discord server. I'll post it on my Twitter after the show, assuming I remember to do that. And so that is our cocktail recipe for this week, The Bitterness You Have Known. All right. So without any further ado, I'm going to bring on our guests, Gabrielle and Ben. So let us go ahead and transition over to them being on the show. Gabrielle and Ben, welcome to Holy Happy Hour, Batman.
Hello, hello.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thanks. It's really great to have you. How are the two of you doing on this fine evening and morning, I suppose? I'm outing you on text by saying
pretty good.
I'm odd to be in the footsteps of James D'Amato because I'm an avid Skyjacks listener, and also Alex Roberts, who created Starcrossed, and it's one of the games I love to play here in Kansai because everyone can play the game. So yeah,
I just feel very fortunate myself, and I've been I say blessed, and I don't mean it in a corny way. I really feel blessed by the guests that I've had on the show, just by being in the TTRPG space and getting to interact with some pretty awesome people. And those are two of the coolest people that I've gotten to interact with. I feel very fortunate. Alex has been she and I have done stuff together a few times. She was on my other show, Pot of Love, and then she was my first guest on Holy Happy. She was conversations with Alex are the reason this show exists, honestly. It was those conversations that inspired the show to exist in the first place. But I feel like that's just sort of her. She inspires people to do things on the internet, to create and to do new things. But yes, Starcrossed is definitely an inspirational game.
Yeah, I love Starcrossed, but I'm not very good at Jenga. So I once played a 6-minute game of Starcrossed, but it was still very dramatic.
Did you say 6 minutes?
Yeah.
Did the tower fall like in the first scene?
Yeah.
That's a hilarious game of Starcrossed to me, because was it like, I don't know what the aftermath is like in that situation. Does it basically like the two of you walk away and never see each other again?
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah,
It's
we were
like,
playing
right.
playing as an alien and their like interpreter to Earth sort of
cool
setting. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
But it was disastrous.
So, not that I want to keep spending lots of time talking about the other guests that have been on the show, but Ben, if you do like Skyjacks, seriously, probably go check out last week's episode, because
that's what I'm planning to do.
Okay, yeah. I mean, seriously, James talked about lore from Skyjacks for 2 hours and 40 minutes. It was crazy.
That's super exciting. Thank you so much for the invitation, Benjamin.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad to have you guys on the show. Now we can actually talk about the two of you instead of that stuff.
I mean, we can.
I really am excited to talk about your game, Ma Nishtana. But why don't we, before we talk about the game, do you want to sort of tell people a little bit about who you are as sort of background for this?
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about myself first. I'm relatively new in my life to role-playing games. I didn't play them growing up as a kid. But when I moved to Brooklyn, I was looking for sort of a good nerd community, a nerd family, and I found this comic book store nearby, Anyone Comics, and there was also in the basement Anyone RPG and people playing role-playing games, and not just D&D, but lots of weird and wonderful indie games. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the place for me. This is where I want to discover this hobby. And there I got totally sucked in. And, it wasn't long before I was GMing, and then everyone was always asking, one day you'll be the one, you'll make your own game. And I was like, oh, no, never. That will never happen. And then here we are. So it's been really quite a journey. Professionally, I'm an educator at the American Museum of Natural History. So I'm really used to trying to come up with really creative ways of conveying information to people and getting people excited about things, and learning in a really, hands-on way is something I'm really passionate about.
Awesome.
And I am a graduate student at Kyoto City University of Art, studying concept design, and which is just like the catch-all major for just like do what you want to do. Because what I want to do is design games that are like I'm designing games that are tabletop role-playing games, and I'm designing LARPs because I want to through Quest Kansai, which is a small gaming group and organization, like create a thriving gaming community here in Kyoto where I am, because there's like communities in Tokyo, but it's not like super strong right here in Kansai. And so I was a camp counselor at a LARP summer camp for 5 years, and I loved it. And I saw children like really come into themselves and have the excuse of being in character to explore different parts of themselves. And I think it's just such a revelation to use and experience something new through gaming. And I love that. So I'm really excited to do this because Ma Nishtana is a great game to explore what it's like to be in someone else's shoes, and to help me rethink and reconsider the traditions that I have experienced in my own personal in my own family, and then like going over to Gabrielle's house and experiencing with hers because we're cousins. So
yeah, I was going to say that's the other part of the background of this, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what Ben's alluding to was kind of the inciting spark for this game, actually, in an indirect way. So yeah, Ben and I are cousins. We grew up pretty close together. But it wasn't until our sort of adulthood that we reconnected as, sort of discovering we had this shared hobby. But it was at Passover at my parents' house. And I have always found the Passover Seder to be a ritual that has a lot of potential that I really am drawn towards, but has had over time kind of become very rote and sort of repetitive. And we always had the same fights at the same time about what to, when should we eat dinner and all that stuff. And I was always disappointed, right, that this potential I felt for ritualistic storytelling, which obviously I love, wasn't really coming to its fruition. And so Ben and I were sitting at the end of the kids' table, I think, right, even though we were in our 20s, of course. You stay kids for a long time. But we started just sort of bantering and coming up with our own version of the story. And we had kind of just a little improv game going where I would say a scene and then Ben would say what might happen next. And we had so much fun with that later on, it occurred to me, the Passover Seder is in its own way a role-playing game. You're telling the story of these characters, you're retelling it together, and it really had the potential to truly be a tabletop role-playing game where you could really embody those characters and make your own decisions and feel immersed in that story. And so I had this idea. I was like, I think we could really make this a game. And when Ben heard about it, Ben was like, I have to be involved. And that was the best thing that ever happened because I have a tendency to come up with ideas and then never do anything with them. But Ben actually, follows through with things. So it was a very, very helpful collaboration that we started and brought us to creating this game together.
Well, I think the reason I jumped in was I had been listening to Design Doc, which is run by Hannah Schaefer and Evan Rowland on the one.
Great podcast, people. It's on One Shot now, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's a really great show.
Yeah.
And they're over at Turtle Bun. And they made a great game called Questlandia. And they're like working forever on a game called Questlandia 2. And so one version of their game is actually what kind of is one of the core parts of our game. For example, in Questlandia 2, in one of their versions, you could describe certain complications of certain scenes, and there's really clever, ingenious ways of framing scenes that I was like, this is perfect, and this will actually help us make this game. So it was not like I want to participate, even though it was like that. It was like I see how we can do this, right? And so I'm just so thankful for them. And then it's not the only game that is in the DNA of Ma Nishtana, but Gabrielle, would you like to talk?
Yeah, totally. One of my favorite role-playing games is Dialect by Thorny Games, which is Catherine Himes and Hakan Sayalioglu. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, but Dialect by Thorny Games is one of my absolute favorite role-playing games. It's a GM-less game. It's a game about language. And it's a game entirely played out in scenes of dialogue. And the book provides really a strong structure that sort of guides you through those scenes. And you kind of know in advance what's going to happen. You're starting out as an isolated community, and eventually by the end you will dissolve. And it always stuck with me as a really innovative and powerful way to structure a role-playing game. And so I was personally very inspired by that game in terms of GM-less, scene-based, strong structure that you sort of know in advance. And the other game, similarly, that was really important was Bluebeard's Bride by Marissa Kelly. Amazing. Another game which I absolutely love. That was the first game I ever GM'd, which was very challenging, but kind of a trial by fire. But that game, starts off with the collective reading of a text, which is something we brought into our game. And again, is a game where you know how it's going to end. And you know that you're retelling a story, a folk tale that has been told many times. So those are the two games that I personally was very inspired by.
Yeah, I just saw a YouTube Let's Play, like the start of it, in Japanese, and it was just like so powerful to because one of the things that was really great about Bluebeard's Bride is how woven in the safety mechanics are into the game. And the same thing is true for Alex Roberts' Star-Crossed, because and with Alex Roberts for the Queen, the X card. I love games that bring in safety and as part of the fiber of the game, because it makes everything more comfortable. Yeah. Right. And also it allows you to play more deeply and freely, because I think people, especially with a story that's not personal to them. Like one of the people who so graciously played our game, Jamie at Temporal Hiccup, he played the game even and ran it and hosted it, even though they were not Jewish, but because of the safety mechanics and like the way we kind of structured the game, where it's like a slow reading of a text and like helping usher people in and give them a shared story to begin with. Like people feel more comfortable sinking into a story they might not be so familiar with, and you know, it's those games that are just super inspirational. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of designing my first. Well, it's not. I'm in the middle of designing a tabletop role playing game, and it's a divorce/breakup game. And I did get feedback. So we did like our first play test, which we recorded for my podcast, and the feedback I got was from someone who is a friend and who is divorced, who said, so weaving the safety mechanics into your game is probably really smart for you to do. And so I was like, yeah, okay. So I paused all my design process to like just start absorbing safety mechanics in other games, some of the ones you named and other ones that are out there. But the fact that they're included is a part. So which safety mechanics, for folks who are, you know, maybe watching, did you end up including in this game?
Yeah. So we took a kind of, a pretty wide approach to that. Both Ben and I have our sort of favorite safety tools. So we have a section in the book called Playing Safely, where we introduce several and we kind of let the group sort of decide. They know that these are all available to them, that they can use. So one, which is really simple but powerful, especially for a game that could deal with intense themes, is the open door policy. So just from the beginning, reminding everyone that you're not trapped into this experience, and if you need to or want to leave for any reason, go do that. No one's going to judge you. The X card, which I know can be controversial and people have mixed feelings about it, but personally I found it very powerful as a player, and so we wanted to include that as an option. Lines and veils, which also I found really useful. As a person who doesn't like gore, the veil is my favorite tool to be like, please, let's veil gore. I love that tool. And we also kind of borrowed from the, trying to remember now, it's the flower, what's it called? Remember
Safety
Ben?
flower?
The safety flower, that's right. Trying to remember who it's by, but we kind of pulled from the safety flower, and we have this idea of not enough or too much to help people sort of just reflect back to the group. Okay, I like where this is going. I want to do more, or this is too much for me. But what I'd say is actually has kind of become the breakout star of our game is a mechanic we introduced. And I didn't even think of it from the beginning as a safety tool, but it's become incredibly valuable for that purpose. And it's this mechanic called wait, 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 which really is sort of a representation of a conversational tool used in my family, and I think I could speak for many Jewish families, which is this sort of like meaningful interjection, right? The loving, respectful, but important interjection that you as an individual want to make into the conversation. And other people, introverts or people who often have trouble sort of speaking up in games have told me that they find this tool really powerful. Basically, you can either say or sort of gesture that you want to make a suggestion or ask a question, and you can use wait, wait, wait to ask a question about gameplay or to make a suggestion for a character. It's really permissive. And so people have told me that it empowers them, or they know they have a tool now they can use to bring something up. And I laughed when I heard that, because I was like, oh, that's just what I'm like all the time. I basically just sort of took my own conversational style, for better or for worse, and put it into this game. But people have told us they really, really like it. And it's become a safety tool, right? Because what you may want people to wait about could be something you're not comfortable with, or, it really has become like sort of the safety tool has become kind of the catch-all in our game, I'd say.
Yeah. And this game, Benjamin, is like designed not only for like gamers, like it's designed for like families as well. So we wanted to like have really graceful mechanics. And the wait mechanic is partly inspired by Script Change by Brebo Sheldon.
Who's, by the way, that's my guest next week. I just want to throw that in there real quick.
Oh, wow.
Really?
That's the guest next week at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. They're a quick commercial. Go ahead. Keep going. Sorry. That's my wait. I want to make sure I know. Say, that's our guest next week.
Wait. And you know, I was recently playing Wanderhome by Dre Dragon, and I loved how Jay like has different prompts for wait. Well, yeah, and I just think Script Change is such a great tool. And one of the things that it's inspired by is in one of the early versions of our game, we had a character that was a rabbi. Who like could interject and like change the gameplay. And Gabrielle, this is Gabrielle's like idea. So I'd love Gabrielle to talk more about it. But we were like, we want to bring this even more deeply into this game and like make it not just one character, but everyone's kind of like the rabbi. Like everyone's bringing this like Jewish character through it.
Yeah, that was a real like a huge moment for us when we realized that we could expand it to everyone, because that rabbi character never quite worked. I knew I wanted to capture that aspect of a Passover Seder where people are contextualizing, people are bringing in their own experiences, but having it all sequestered into one character just didn't really make sense. It wasn't balanced for the other characters. It was like, we didn't want to, have opinions about rabbis. That was just like too much for us. But yeah, realizing that, everyone is telling this story together and everyone should have that same power. The game was also originally envisioned as a GM'd game. And so putting the power into the hands of the players, another tool we use for that is this concept of a ritual guide. So we don't have a GM, but, excuse me, each scene of the game that is sort of GM'd by a different player. So it's kind of handed off, this responsibility is handed off from player to player, and they then take on the role of the ritual guide for that ritual. They have some prompts to read, and they sort of GM a little bit that scene. And so those two things, I think, wait for everybody, and then the ritual guide role was how we handled that, the decision paralysis that can happen in some GM-less games sometimes. Personally, I've struggled with a lot of GM-less games as a player because I really like plot. Unsurprisingly, this is a game that has a very explicit story. I'm a big fan of plot. And so games without plots often leave me as a player wanting more. Mm-hmm. And so by having still a person who's sort of responsible for guiding that scene forward solves that without there being one person at the table who is responsible for that.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that, because I've experienced the same kind of thing where either myself or just in games I've played and feedback I've gotten from people I played with, my wife is one of these people that she similarly finds GM-less games to be really challenging, because she's just, sometimes we're just like not sure. We actually had this challenge. So Starcross is like our favorite game. We played it 1,000 times, but we had this challenge when we first started playing Starcross, because we were like so used to having a GM in our games that we were like, so what do we do now? Like no one's telling us like what to. So it was like a little bit of learning for us, but I think you're right. Like I think that's important in GM-less games, because the game I'm designing is to like help the players to know like how to step forward into the narrative, which is I'm finding to be a hard thing to design. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, Benjamin, does your divorce game have a name yet? But like I'm like really interested in like what you're trying to do and how to bring that into a GM-less like space.
Thanks. Yeah, it's called Broken. And it has like a subtitle, which I'm spacing on top right now, but we did a playtest run of it on Pot of Love, my podcast I do with my wife. And it was really just like the bare bones of the game. It was like I knew some of the core things I wanted to do in it. I was very inspired by the game 10 Candles. I knew my original approach to that game was basically like Star-Crossed is to Dread as 10 Candles is to this game. And I wanted it to be a tragic romance game that always ends in breakup no matter what.
I love that.
So we could I'll gladly talk to you about it when we're not doing this show because I don't want to take more time away from your, but I'm interested in like the design element of this, right? Like helping people. Well, and it's interesting because your game is there is a story. Right. Already there's the Passover story. Right. So like, can you talk a little bit about like, how do you design play around a story that already exists? Like what's the tension there?
Yeah. I mean, Bluebeard's Bride, I think, is a really good example of this. But of course there's a difference between a folk tale and a religious tale. But maybe not as big of a difference as you might think. I think, it's an oral tradition, it's a story. And I think, again, the way that I was raised with the Passover Seder was always about drawing parallels to our current time, talking about how we as individuals could relate to it. I think sort of the intention of the ritual was to remember the history, but also to think about your current moment and the possible futures. And so because I think the spirit of the ritual and the story was always sort of about that, sort of imagining yourself thinking about these traditions in your own culture that have persisted. So we kind of just sort of extended that, and the difference kind of just sort of extended that, and how some people wonder when they're playing this game, how far can I depart from that narrative? And we've tried to give some guidance in the beginning of the book to discuss that. But I think what flows somewhat naturally, or what we're trying to do, is show people that they're going to be following the structure of the story. They're going to be following those key beats. There's going to be, a demand for freedom. There's going to be a barrier to that freedom. There's going to be a show of wonder. And then there's eventually going to be the, finding freedom, right? So people sort of know what's coming, right? Especially after they've read the text, right? Whatever level of background knowledge they bring to our game, we give them that background knowledge. And so that way, they know the bones of the story they're telling, but they get to decide how to fill it in as they play.
One of the things that I love about the Passover Seder is that you're retracing footsteps, right? And you are bringing new connection to the story, and you're deepening your awareness of the themes, of the perspectives of the characters every time. So it's, although the youngest person asks questions at the Seder, like usually, if there's certain 4 questions, it's about them coming into a community in a space that everyone has experienced already, and they're in the footsteps of others who have been on the same journey. And it's actually truly magical. And like one of the things that I'm so glad that we got to do in our game is bring in like certain things from your own life into the story. So like at the start of every scene, there's like a ritual action, right? That's kind of in, we hadn't played before we started writing the game, but like in Firebrands by Megan and Vincent Baker, they have like certain activities for different scenes, and in like that, I actually haven't played Firebrands yet, even though I feel I need to. But it's I can imagine that it's like you're retracing these themes with like new thoughts and new experiences every time. And like one really cool aspect about Ma Nishtana, which is Gabrielle's idea, is the creating your own ritual. And so like in one of the rituals, it says create your own ritual, and think about how the elements in our game could be reinterpreted into your own experience in a future game, so that every time you play the game, it's enriched more and more, and you can actively be slowly designing around and building on the core game, which is, I think, is genius and fabulous, and really speaks to the heart of what the story is, which it's not our game, it's like our game, right? It's a game where anyone who can think about what it's like to be oppressed, and to reconsider those themes and, rededicate themselves to being a better citizen in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I love traditions. And so that was the idea was, families or groups of people who, come together every year to perform the same rituals together, accrue traditions as a group that are unique, right? That's why everyone's, family or group Seder is going to be different from the next house over. Because of, that one time, someone spilled the wine or, we always hide this in this place or that kind of thing. And so I really wanted to capture that and have, encourage players to feel like they are now part of a community. They've created a community by playing this game. And if they wanted to, that they could make this game a tradition for them as a group and that it could build over time like that.
So this is the first time I think, as both being a priest and a tabletop roleplay enthusiast, this is the first time I think that I've been, the priest part of me was excited and amazed by the concept of a game when I heard of it first, before the role-playing part of me, the gaming part of me. And that's because one of the things I've always been interested in as a Christian, from my perspective as a Christian, looking into Judaism as an outsider. And one of the things that I've been, I think jealous is an okay word to use, about sort of some of the stuff I see in Jewish practice and tradition and theology is what you're describing as this stepping into the footsteps of history. In the chat we have, so I'm bringing this up because there was a great comment earlier in the conversation in the chat about how it's beyond that. You were told to see yourself as though you yourself came from Egypt. When I was first introduced as an Episcopalian, way before I was a clergy person, when I was introduced to the Holy Eucharist, or our meal, right, our ritual meal, which has its roots in the Passover as well, in the Passover meal, right? When I was introduced to that, it was first introduced to me as being you are connected in time and even in space to the night of the Last Supper of Jesus with his friends. And I was that is so cool. There's something about that I just love, but I feel like Christians, in my experience, I hate to make a universal statement, we just do not do a great job of connecting ourselves to history, to we tell the stories of Scripture so much, but we don't live into them in the way that I see the Jewish tradition doing, and Jewish people doing, and Jews theologically doing. So I've always been enamored by that. And so when I found your game, I was oh my God, because it's a way to use role playing to take that concept and really live into it even further. What oppression, and you said, what oppression have you known? That idea of connecting yourself now with also being back in the past. And it's just the whole thing is amazing to me on a role-playing level and a theological level. I didn't ask a question. I just ranted for a little bit. I'm sorry.
I'm recalling a few times in my childhood. So one of the free people my parents offloaded my sister and me on for babysitting was my Aunt Meg, who on Sundays would take us with her to church. And then we would eat pancakes and stuff afterward. And so one of the super cool things about this is Christian church, and one of the super cool things about Christianity is creating a sacred space, and you're really in a physical space, like a magic circle that you're really able to step over the threshold and be in a space where you can feel more connected, right? And it's wonderful. And in LARP, we do this too. We try to create a magic circle that people feel they can get into character more. And I think just there's an emphasis, at least as far as I feel, with regards to space and time, because in Judaism, it's Shabbat or Passover Seder, you're marking these cathedrals in time where you can get into this, into the religious character, or feel spiritual, or think more about meaning in a certain time frame. So no matter where you are, I live in Japan, but I am just as able to connect to who I am as a Jew as I would be in New York, even though I'm not with a community right now. So so I'm with my community. I love my friends and stuff, but I don't have my family. So, yeah.
Ben, I know that's something that you were really excited about with Ma Nishtana, was the idea, the opportunity to start to help you foster that community and for Jews around the world. Ben, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think there's just like a lot of people who feel disconnected. Like I was raised in an extremely secular household. Like I don't know the prayers, and we like just celebrate the high holidays. And so like as an adult, like it's like I feel very ungainly because I actually love practicing like Judaism and lighting candles and like thinking more deeply about things. And that's just kind of who I am. And like one of the aspects of this game that it gives you an excuse, or if I need one, to like explore my Judaism in a deeper way. I think that even though we're in a very connected age where everyone's on like Twitter or Facebook, I think these are very kind of, it feels dangerous spaces because like you're not welcome to be everything of who you are because there's always someone watching. And so one of the things that role-playing games allows to do, whether I'm like playing online, like on the Gauntlet or on Discord, it's creating these like micro spaces where I can connect with other people. And I think, you know, games about religion can help people think, or like have like a religious aspect, or like people thinking about it when creating it helps us connect more deeply and create more of an experience of meaning that I think is like vacant in a lot of aspects in our 21st century life, right? I feel like we live more thinly than we have before, right? It's more superficial, you know, rather than going on the streets, people have a more cosmetic progressivism that's, you know, and I think that like being in person with people is extremely important, but if you're not able to do that, or you don't feel as confident as you could be to like leave your house and connect with other people physically, like, you know, we are currently in the panini. It's like, I think, you know, games allow a certain space to do that. And I think that's one of the magical things that Ma Nishtana, in my experience, has allowed me to do. Like connect with my Judaism at a distance, and that's perfectly fine and fun, right? So, yeah.
Oh, it's fascinating that I had intended to ask you to talk about the intentionality of designing games to play online, like, and how, you know, this game was designed around being able to be played online, but you just made a connection that I think is super fascinating between like the magic circle of being able to approach a topic at it, or a subject or an experience at a distance, with like the distance of playing online. That's really interesting. That's really interesting commonality there. I don't know.
What do you think is interesting about it?
Well,
please, I'm like,
yeah. Trust me, I'm barely grabbing onto this thread right now. Yeah, I just hadn't made the connection of safety and the ability to explore something that you can do. So you can do it online, right? Because like the internet provides the ability to have a certain level of anonymity, which can be dangerous too, but it can also provide the ability to explore spaces that maybe you can't explore in your regular life. And I know like a lot of people who are like out in their online communities in ways that they're not out in, say, like their physical everyday life, right? And the online space gives them the ability to like, and I don't think it's unfair to say play in that space. And that's the same thing as the magic circle, like kind of does in it conceptually in like a play sense in a game. And just, I never connected that. Like it must be the distance, I guess, like that allows you to have that ability.
Well, it's really funny to hear you describe our game as a game that's like designed around being online, because originally, of course, that wasn't the plan, right? This game was envisioned as a very much a tabletop game. It's a Seder. Yeah. You're sitting around a Seder plate together. You're pouring wine into each other's cups, you know? Mm-hmm. And it was a huge challenge for us. I mean, pretty much right away in fact, I play tested this game for the very first time at our very first remote Seder right when the pandemic was hitting. It was my family. And it was a kind of one weird benefit of our normal routine being disrupted, as my mom was like, yeah, sure, why not? We'll play your weird game on Zoom. Might as well. Awesome. And actually they loved it. Couldn't be worse. Couldn't hurt. No, actually, she was excited about it. I'm misrepresenting her. But even, family members that might have been reluctant, because there's stuff they're used to every year, were just sort of like, okay, sure. And so on the one hand, it was really, sad and hard to not be able to be with them and to celebrate in our normal ways. But it also made it clear to me that it was possible, right? It's possible to have fun and tell stories and connect. And even we had our own separate Seder plates across Zoom, and we were breaking our matzah and stuff. But Ben alluded to earlier this element we brought into our game, which are these sort of like moments where you pop out of the player character and come into the player. And we added these in. We kept going back and forth over, what do? We know we want rituals. We know we want physical acts. Originally, it was supposed to be, literally the acts of the Passover Seder, dipping, vegetables into salt water, etc. But we didn't want to require our players to prepare a Seder plate. That didn't feel right or the right way to approach it. And so we really went through many, many iterations of what do we do? And what we landed on rituals that, like Ben was mentioning. So, for example, for karpas, where in person you're dipping greens into salt water and eating them. If you're either remote or you've just chosen to do these sort of alternate rituals in person, what you do instead is you show the other players something old or that has been yours for a long time and describe how it has a new use or meaning in your life. And so this is the player, not the character. So, on Zoom, we have people, pulling out like pictures or, picking up their pets. And like, it really did a lot to create that space, that sense of knowing that you're with another person on the other end of that screen, but also it's curated, right? People are choosing what to show, choosing what to bring in and share with other people. So people have that control and that safety over it. And we also we want it to be very permissive. So, you can make it very lighthearted or you can make it serious, whatever you're comfortable with. But we found that really accelerated and really facilitated that comfort and that familiarity that led to people really getting into rich experiences in the game.
And to piggyback off that, like one thing that we have for every scene, it is related to one aspect or one ritual action of the traditional Passover Seder. But there's the alternative ritual actions are played, can be totally played remote, right?
Yes,
because we're designing this through 2020, 2021.
All of our playtests until most recently, I finally did it in person. I had earned enough cred from that first remote Seder that my family was like, we can do it in person too. And I was like, so that was the first in-person playtest. So yeah, this entire game has been developed, playtested almost entirely remotely. Yeah, keep going, Ben.
Yeah, and so hopefully we'll have about like 100 playtesters have gone through the game and like all sorts of different people. And like we got to play it at like online gaming conventions like Metatopia, like the International LARP Festival, and like have different perspectives on it, which I'm so grateful for. And like, yeah, because this is not just our game, it's a game for everyone. And like, we would want when people were thinking about like hiring first would be someone who's a sensitivity reader, mm-hmm. right? Because this is a game about, enslaved peoples, right? These like really hard hitting topics. And that really speak to like current issues and like trying to create a game that not only navigates those waters, but gives us the confidence to swim in the rapids is something that I think is super cool.
Yeah, like for example, it's a game about historical enslaved people, and that is an aspect of many, many different people's histories, not only Jews' histories, and of course much more recently in other communities. And so, yeah, as Ben said, we're definitely looking for sensitivity readers on which we're planning to pay, because we know that before we put this, right now the game is in open beta, so it exists right now on itch for pay what you want, and we'll share that link with everyone.
I already dropped the link in the chat, and I'll do it again probably towards the end of the show.
Perfect. Yeah, so it's an open beta right now. We consider it ready enough that we want your feedback, but not finished. And part of that is seeking those sensitivity readers so that we make sure we're really releasing a game that is welcoming to everyone and not alienating. That would be the last thing that we would want for our game.
Yeah. One of the things I love about the game is that, half the characters are not Jewish, right? Or at least they don't come from a Jewish household, right? There's you can play the Pharaoh. You can play the princess who adopted Moses, even though you don't have to have her adopt Moses in the story. The game can really veer off. We played a setting of the game that was set in New York and about a company called Egypt. Because we're how can we make this game setting that is not in Egypt? And so that's one of the things we are looking forward to, have people create different background settings that the story can fit into. But we have Zipporah, who is exploring a new Jewish identity, right? We have Bitya, the princess, and then you can play as Miriam, Moses, or Aaron, and it's these are really
Zipporah.
Characters. Yeah, I think, and she's a wonderful, an interesting player, a character, because she's figuring out who she is, because she was not born a Jew, but she's becoming one, becoming one of the Hebrew people, and so it's really cool to explore different perspectives in the scene, right? Moses is not necessarily the center of your story.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. There's a scene that will be a call to action, but who receives that call is up to the ritual guide of that scene and the players in that scene. So that's where we decided to have the beats of the story. But, personally, one goal I had for this story was to really surface some of the characters who don't normally get spotlit in retellings of the Exodus story. And so we wanted to have, female characters, although we do also encourage players to sort of assign genders and pronouns to their characters as they see fit. But at least in the traditional narrative, women from the story were really important for me to surface beyond just Miriam. And so we have a kind of gender parity in our player character, the characters you could choose, which was really important to me.
Yeah. And one thing that I'm so glad, I'm sorry, Benjamin, but I want to give a shout out to everyone who participated in the Matzah Jam that we ran, and Gabrielle had the idea and ran it. I actually didn't really have any input except submitting a game, but wonderful games In Every Generation by Jonas Siena, or Matzah Matzah by was it Javi's song, and The Fifth Child by Abraham, Yosef Baez. These are super cool games, and I just want to give a shout out because we don't want to make this a game that's just for us, right? Although I would love for Gabrielle to come and play with me here, but.
Are you trying
in the vision of in our dream Kickstarter, my dream stretch goal is fly me to Japan to play this game with Ben.
Yeah. So and also have all of the Matzah games, Matzah Jam games, in a PDF that you could download. I want to support other creators, right?
Well, I was going to ask you if all the Matzah Jam games are collected somewhere that we can link.
Yeah, so they right now live on itch in the Jam, on the Jam page, and I'll give you that link.
Awesome.
So if you go to the Matzah Jam page and click on submissions, you'll see all 8 games there. And I'm really proud to say that we have 2 games from first-time game designers in that, and at least 2 on that list, which I'm really, really excited about. And so, it was such a fun experience, wanting to connect with other Jewish game designers or people interested in writing Jewish games. So the theme of it was just Passover-inspired games. And we had such a variety from, queer love stories to discussions of Jewish trauma to a very lighthearted, game about, coming home from a party. So we have like such a wide variety of perspectives, and I was totally blown away by that.
Yeah, I apologize to everybody. I think me opening the chat probably shifted all of us over to the side for like a second. But I wanted to link the coming home from a party game. Am I remembering correctly? Because I think I saw that. Isn't that a for the Queen? Yeah.
Yeah, that one I wrote,
that's
and it was
game. Oh, that's right.
It was so funny.
So.
After trying to write Ma Nishtana, which is from scratch, totally different story, to just doing a hack. I was like, oh, this is so much easier. I didn't have to come up with the game structure. Another genius, set of designers already did that for me. But yeah, that game is very, very loosely connected to Passover. What really the connection I made there was that last card of For the Queen or any descendant from the Queen games where you have to kind of confront, make a choice. It reminded me of the Afikomen, like the fact that there's a distinctive end ritual associated with the end of the game was really my touchstone for that. But then from there, I just thought of, what's
Gabrielle, can you define what an afikomen is for our audience?
Of course. Thank you, Ben. So the afikomen is the last thing that you eat in a Passover Seder. It's a piece of the matzah that you earlier break off, and then depending on the family's traditions, either the youngest child hides it or an adult hides it, and then the kids have to find it. But it's a really fun, it brings a sort of game element into the Passover Seder for a family where people are running around trying to find this hidden thing. And you're not allowed to end the Seder until it's found, and it has to be the last thing that you eat. So if you have dessert, you have to have dessert first, and then you eat the afikomen, and that's the last, that's sort of closes the ritual, right? So there's an explicit ritual for closing that, for leaving that magic circle. And it's something that I've always found very powerful about Passover Seder. And I made that connection to the For the Queen games, and that's why I wanted to make a hack. And
what that reminds you of is actually the importance of food, and like eating something, or like drinking something in like religious practice, and creating like a community space, like a place where we can like settle down, we can lean back and enjoy and be a little indulgent with each other, and and because when you're eating with other people, it's like really helps you connect. And in Dream Apart in Dream Askew, let me get last names correct. Oh my gosh, the Jewish
Avery Alder and Benjamin Rosenbaum.
Rosenbaum, thank you. They like have this wonderful idea of putting recipes in the book, which was like, wow. And like it really helps you like get into the space and the tone of the games, which is about community. And especially in a GM-less game, it's like, how do you create a space where you're free to interject, right? And I think food is a really important part of that.
I can't believe I'm about to bring this game up, but Ben, do you know the Olive Garden LARP from Jeff Stormer? Are you familiar with such things?
Oh, I love the Olive Garden LARP. I made a game 2 years ago, maybe, about being deer in space that's made for Starbucks. And cool. It's like you create things from the trash at your table into a spaceship. But I love the Olive Garden LARP. It's really like about generations of family. Enter the space and then slowly eat the meal.
Right. Yeah. What I like about it, and when I first encountered it from Jeff constant, like every now and then tweeting about it, whatever, and reading the game. I was like, oh, it's funny, haha, Olive Garden LARP, but it's actually like not. If you actually like, I'm like one of the things that I'm regretful from the pandemic is that it's really prevented me from ever actually playing the Olive Garden LARP, because like we talked about doing it, and then we just didn't make it to an Olive Garden before the pandemic hit.
Does Olive Garden still have infinite breadsticks?
I have no idea. It's a great question. It would be a real shame if they like got in the way of that LARP being able to continue to be played. That'd be heartbreaking, tragic. But exactly. Yeah, I'm curious. I just have some sort of, we are getting close to 7, but I have, 7 my time. I'm curious, though, about like, you talked about doing the game both online and in person, and doing the Passover Seder online and in person. I'm just curious, like, what you found was like good about online, lacking online, better in person, lacking more in person, like that kind of thing. And honestly, for either one, because if you've done the Passover Seder both online and in person, I'm equally curious about the religious implications of that. So whichever is interesting to you, I suppose.
I mean, one obvious benefit of doing it online is being able to do it with people around the world, right? As long as you can get the time zones to line up. So, being able to celebrate with Ben and being able to play test this game with people all around the world, that's been incredible. And I don't think that would have happened otherwise. And, that's something that's come out of this experience for a lot of us, I think, is realizing, we can stay connected to people who are far apart from us physically. And that's been a benefit. And another thing is just forcing us to think outside of the box when it comes to rituals, which I think was a benefit to the game. But on the other hand, staring at Zoom for, 3 hours is exhausting. And, I'm an extrovert and I'm someone who normally gets really charged up by social interactions, but Zoom doesn't cut it, and it exhausts me as everyone, I think. And when we got to finally see each other again, for the Seder in person, that just felt like a real homecoming, and there was something you just cannot replicate, of just sharing a physical space with other people, I would say.
At the same time, I've only ever played this game online. And I would love to once we get this finished, because I don't like to keep changing an object on the move, but I would love to play this game with my boyfriend, because, he has no background in Jewish tradition, obviously. And he doesn't speak English, so it's I would love to translate this and then experience this with him and friends in person. But there's so many advantages to playing online. I love playing. I'm just going to shout out the gauntlet here, because you can type things in chat, right? And you can, one of the foundations of a lot of our current games, that are based on Apocalypse World, run by that engine, is that if it's not spoken out loud, the idea is not spoken out loud, it doesn't exist in the game space, which is one of the super cool things, but also limitations of the Apocalypse World engine. And by typing things in the chat, or even changing your background or changing your name, these are things that help you navigate the game space and change it around yourself. And maybe I'm misframing that for Apocalypse World, but that's been my experience with it. But there's certain things you can do on Zoom that you can't do in person. So there's strengths and weaknesses for both.
Yeah, one of our rituals that works better in Zoom is the Makot Mitzrayim, the recounting the plagues, because basically what you do is each person takes a turn just coming up with a plague, basically. And answering a personal question for their character. And then they turn off their Zoom camera. And they keep it off through the next scene. And we did that to try to, there's in an actual Seder, there's a lot of moments of silence and there's things like that. And I gotta say, it gives me chills every time. Wow. It's like 10 candles, but when the people that you've been connecting with, suddenly their screen goes blank. So you can't really get that in person.
Unless you left the room or something.
Yeah.
It's just not as easy to do that as, oh my gosh, the idea.
Yeah, you don't have the tension of they're here, but not here.
Yeah.
Right? Everything has gone dark.
Yeah. Yeah, we keep ending up talking the last, like, I don't know why I didn't expect this. Ever since the show started I was about to say the end of the pandemic, and this latter portion of the pandemic that we're in is what I mean. We started the show back in April, and like I keep talking to game designers, and like every week basically we ended up talking about this interesting experience of like designing games and having ritual experiences online versus in person. And I thought I was actually going to get kind of tired of talking about it in the sense that we talk about the pandemic all the time, but actually in a design sense and like in a ritual sense that we're talking about, it is very interesting. And I think we're only just now starting to be able to like really reflect on it. And we were talking about last week how there's a Monty Cook game that just that was on Kickstarter. It's called I'm spacing on the name now. It's called The Darkest House or something like that. But it was designed completely around online play. And I just think we're now entering into it's been long enough now that we've been in a pandemic that we can start to really say what are the ways we can take advantage of this and the tools of this, not as we're trying to recreate in person, but like you just described designing I can turn off my video. That's a really amazing game tool.
Yeah. And I have two thoughts. One is connecting to you, Benjamin, because, although you're connecting to your, a greater, as a priest, you're connecting to a greater audience, or you can speak immediately, face to face with a lot of your congregants. Receiving the sacrament must be a super challenge. And I think maybe we talked about that.
I think we did. Yeah. I can go ahead. What's your second thought?
And then my second thought, was that I forgot my second thought. Give me a second. You talk about the sacrament, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes there. I apologize. I just got excited because since the last time we talked, I've been celebrating the Eucharist in person. So I've gone now for the transition that we're talking about, and I think for my community it was very. I don't know if I know what the right word is for it. Not being able to share the table for a year and a half, and the meal being so central to our identity was so disruptive that I think we have experienced a trauma, a heartbreak, a wound that I have no idea when we'll heal from it. My congregation is transformed forever based on the last year and a half. We could talk about the area we just treaded into for conversation. I could spend the next hour talking about it, but we won't. But I could, because
if you want to,
no, I just feel I'll just leave the thought by saying that my congregation has been changed forever, and the people that have come to the table again now. It's not the same community gathering around the table now as it was a year and a half ago. And now that we are gathering around the Eucharistic table again to share bread, we're still not sharing the common cup. So we're not even still really fully entering into the ritual again. So it's still a reminder every week of what's absent. And so there's still pain, I think, there, but it's very real for us in right now as to we're not the same as when we did this last a year and a half ago. And for my congregation especially, it really was a year and plus between when we did it and when we did it again. Anyway,
I'm so sorry.
Oh, thanks. I don't even know how to respond to that because I feel like we're all sharing this experience in the world of this pandemic and all affected by it in different ways. But yeah, did you remember your second thought?
I did remember, but I know I actually would love to talk about this further. But it's as a super harsh transition. One of the pieces of music I'm writing is one of the cool aspects about Zoom is that your image keeps moving around. So I was thinking of a music piece where the background is a really simple score. And so when the conductor points somewhere, everyone sees a different piece of the score because everyone's moving around, right? And so it's like, it's kind of randomizing in a very physical way what people are playing. So that was just a lot. Like there's like different aspects of Zoom that you can use as an element, as a design template for your games. And I think that like Garrett Renninghaus create a wonderful game about, it's called the Bat Cave, where like the screen is upside down, right? And so you're all bats in a cave, because one of the functions of Zoom for PC is that you can flip your camera upside down, and you can be little bats together in a cave.
I didn't even know you could do that. There's so much about Zoom, having spent the last year doing it, that I just feel like I don't know.
I only discovered that because a student did that in my class just to mess with us. So that's how I always find out what Zoom can do, is because students use it.
I'm trying to figure out how to do it right now. I don't know how
I think it's in the preferences.
Yeah.
All right, well, anyway, it took me too long to find it. I did not know you could do that, but that's exactly right. That's so cool. Like the idea that there are these, like we think about them in terms of like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about
obstacles.
What's that?
You're thinking about them in terms of, I was just submitting obstacles.
Oh, I was thinking, yeah, I guess we do think of them as obstacles when really they're like, I was going to say, we think of like tools, like I have dice in front of me, right? And like I feel like when we started designing games, like when I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, like these were like sort of the obvious tools because we had been using them, right? But I think once we realized that they were more than just random number generators, but that they had like some sort of ritual power to them. Yeah, sorry, yeah. What did you say?
I was tactile component. But finish your thought.
Yeah, no, once we realized that, then they became more... When we realized that they were already more than just randomizers, that's when I feel like people started to like say, like, well, what else? Right? Like, what else is there to use? And, you do LARP, so I feel like LARP community has been ahead of tabletop RPG community in this regard. Maybe I'm not... I don't know. Do you think that's true?
I think one super cool thing about LARP is like you're physicalizing everything, and so at least for the American like boffer or freeform LARP, there's like a lot of representation, which is not like the same as Nordic or Jeep form, where it's like what you see is what you get. Like what you dress is like how you are. Like you're not shooting off spells, but like a tactile object, and this goes to like what your conversation before, like the importance of like physical objects in space. Like so here's like called the spell packet that I was like making last night, so that I can have a game for kids. And so inside is birdseed, and here's the birdseed container. And so you can safely throw this at like someone else and be like freeze, and like you're throwing the little packet, and if you get hit, you have like a spell. It's like representing magic, and so it's just like there's something really exciting about physically being able to touch the game, because it allows you to like in your body like get into the game world, and that's like something that's super important about dice. That you're talking about, and also about like religious practice, like being able to touch things. Even with Judaism, we're like a temple in time, but like hold on, I'm sorry.
I tried to pull up your YouTube link and I accidentally lost our video into things. So hold on,
sorry,
everybody.
Yeah,
it's because go ahead, Ben. It's because I screwed up Zoom. You guys can talk; they can hear you. I will try to fix this. I'm sorry to all of our viewers. Go ahead.
No, it's really fine. And so I'm like, I'm not sure if they saw, it's just like a piece of fabric.
That part was we literally just lost the video like 2 seconds ago. I'm trying to
when you're in the Passover Seder, you have the Haggadah, which is like a physical book that you're touching. And so in our game, if it was to be in person, you like pass it around the table as you become the new lead of the scene, like the ritual guide.
Physical and tactile, gaming is really important to me, and I've learned a lot from that, from my friendship and sort of being part of a gaming community with Avraham Baez. And he was on a panel at Metatopia in 2020, which was the link that doomed our video setup.
We're back though, so it's all good.
But if you are able to share that in the chat,
it's there.
I highly recommend it. Awesome. tactile games waiting to touch things again. And Avram is developing an amazing game called Trapped, which is also a historical game and about worker unions sort of protesting against unfair working conditions. But as players are playing the game, they're also collectively sewing a piece of, a textile together because it's inspired by the textile workers and the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. So there's, I think, a really exciting movement right now in the field of people, like to expand on what Benjamin was saying and Ben were saying, we now realize, that physically touching things and having ritual is so important to us. And I'm excited to see where we take it as a community.
Yeah, this was our topic last week in the first hour was keepsake games. And that idea of like making something that you're tactile and like the physicality and why that's important. So it was a good episode last week. We talked about this exact subject. As I said, we keep talking about.
I gotta check it out. Yeah,
same stuff. Hey, feel free. We keep talking about these same things because I think that we've learned over the last year. It's just, I guess, being in online spaces so much for the last year and a half has helped us both see like what's beneficial about that and also like where the pain is and like what's missing and all that stuff. And it's interesting to see it, for me, to see it spill into this design conversation. And
it connects to the top of the hour with, one thing I love about Alex Roberts' games is like there's always a physical component that she's always thinking about. Like even if it's just like popping balloons, right? There's like a physical aspect that helps you get into the game. It's like using the anything as a design surface that helps you get into character and think more deeply and feel it, right? Whether that's a Jenga tower or just some cards that you pass around the table. The physical object changes the story. And I think that's something that's super powerful about the Passover Seder is like these physical objects you touch help us remember
and eat.
Mm-hmm.
We have one ritual for Mara where you have to eat something that you don't like but feel comfortable eating. Because I wanted, I was like, there's certain aspects of the Passover experience that are so iconic. Horseradish. I mean, although I like horseradish, so for me, eating horseradish doesn't make me like think of sadness. It just makes me happy. But we wanted to capture that and. That's a really fun one. And like seeing people like all get kind of like, I make myself have like some kind of hot sauce I don't like or something. And, but of course only participating to the extent that you're comfortable with. But that's a really fun one. And eating is, and the experience you can get from eating something is something that you really nothing can compare to.
I always connect the bitterness thing is really interesting to me. The reason why I picked that for doing the cocktail it was not to be flippant, and this is specifically a kind of Christian connection. One of the most powerful parts of the Passion narrative for me in the New Testament is the moment when John's Gospel quotes Ruth and puts in the idea of Mary, the concept of Ruth saying, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has done very bitterly with me." And like that, I find that to be very powerful and emotional. And it's one of the things that makes me want to play your game, which I haven't gotten to do yet, but hopefully I'll get to. Anyway, something fresh in my mind. Go ahead, Ben. Did you have?
I was just thinking about bitterness and like, because it is, a very strong and bitter year for a lot of folks. And I would love going into like, if we get to Kickstart in 2020, somehow help us remember, hope and like the sweetness of freedom, in the bitter world that we live in. Right. And I think, games allow us to navigate both. Right.
Yeah. As Ben is briefly mentioning that we are sort of have a rough timeline in our own head that we'd love to do a Kickstarter in the coming year. I've just shared our email address with Benjamin, and he'll share it with everyone else. We are really looking for people to help us bring our game to that final stage. So as we mentioned, sensitivity readers and all these people we want to pay very well. Sensitivity readers, artists. We have some really beautiful art that Ben has created, which I absolutely love. But where we want to bring more perspectives, it's really not that the art is as we have it isn't good. It's wonderful.
I mean, it's just stuff I made.
It's actually great. It's really great. But what we're looking for is bringing new perspectives into the game, right? Ben and I have two different perspectives. We're two different people, but we also have a lot in common. We're literally cousins. And we'd really like to have other voices. We'd really like to hire people of color, people who can bring really different perspectives, whether they're Jewish or not. We're not only looking for Jewish artists or Jewish sensitivity readers, although we're very welcome to that. So yeah, pretty much anyone who'd like to make art for our game, be a sensitivity reader, write an essay for us. Something I've loved in a lot of recent games are those sort of short essays that accompany the game in the book that expand on some of the themes and can draw some connections for people. So if you're an essayist or have an essay already related to these themes, we'd love to hire you. And then finally, anyone who wants to help us develop further settings for the game, like the one that Ben mentioned about eShipped. So yeah, those are all people we're looking for, and please do get in touch with us if you think that could be you.
Awesome. So you did an amazing job transitioning us towards the end of the show. Thank you both of you for sticking around past the hour. I really appreciate it. Where can folks find you out there other than the email address? Like, where are you, and is there anything else you want to promote while you have a chance here at the end of the show?
Yeah, we're on itch. You already have the game. And then I'm on Twitter at Gabrielle Rab. That's my personal Twitter. So it's stuff about our game, stuff about teaching in museums, stuff about leftist politics in Brooklyn. Good grab bag.
Cool.
You could find me at Kyoto_Ben. Which is a pun in Japanese, and is there I translate posts by designers in English to Japanese and Japanese to English, and then post videos of me working on Spellbook, which is a game about learning the kanji, like the characters of Japanese, through a journaling game about being a wizard creating a book of spells.
Is Ben lagging for you too, Benjamin?
Yeah, he is.
So that's like
sorry, Ben, we lost what you select.
Super long-term project. I'm undergrad.
Sorry, Ben. Having a little bit of internet connectivity with you.
It's the first time it happened this whole hour plus, so I feel like, are you back?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay.
You were saying about your game. I
was saying, I'm working on a game that you can check out on my Twitter, which is about learning the kanji, the Japanese characters.
Yeah.
Zoom just doesn't want to let Ben describe this.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear. Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, Spellbook. It just got really slow while you're describing it, as if some sort of time-altering spell had been cast on you about learning the kanji. What's sad is I'm like dying to hear you say this because like one of my daughters, my middle daughter, is like super. She's learning Japanese. She wants to learn. She would love to play this game. I'm like, I want to know about it so I can share it with her. Well, we may have lost Ben. The timing, well, at least it was at the end of the show and not like at the beginning of the show. You don't look delayed anymore. You look like you're back, but it's hard to say.
I'm just going to say 3 words. Journaling game, wizard, learn languages.
That came through perfectly.
That's how you got your elevator pitch down.
Things that could go wrong when you're playing a game over Zoom. We're just learning it. We're seeing it right here in the moment. All right. Well, Gabrielle, Ben, thank you for coming on the show. Please stick around here in the background for just a moment, and I'm going to do a little goodbye housekeeping stuff with our audience really fast. So goodbye to Ben and Gabrielle. Thank you so much for being on the show. And everybody out there, thank you, as always, for watching Holy Happy Hour Batman this week. I do have a couple of just real quick housekeeping things. I already thanked the guests, but thank you again for giving us the time, for sticking around past the hour. I really appreciate it. For folks watching, please don't forget to hit the follow button. You can also subscribe now to my Twitch, which, is awesome, and I would be, super eternally grateful if you did. Thanks to the people who are subscribed already, Mosberg, and my wife Melissa, also, whose name I don't remember what it is on Twitch, but she subscribed also, so thank you, darling. If you only caught part of tonight's show, if you came in and out, or if you're only catching the end, you'll be able to watch it on demand, video on demand, for a brief time here on my Twitch, but you can head on over to allportsopen.com. That's allportsopen.com to watch every episode of the show after it's done. They're there forever. You can also find That Gamer Priest on YouTube, and you can watch all of the episodes of the show after the fact, and they're there in perpetuity. Please check out more great shows on our network. There's shows like Delinquent Comics and No Avatars Allowed, Pod of Love. I happen to be on all of those. And all the great shows on the network that I'm not a part of, like Wine Dine in 69, Cause and Creation, Blokebusters, Bards and Bourbon. There's tons of them. That's all at allportsopen.com. So huge thanks to Joshua Wise, my APON co-founder, who created the artwork on my stream, and all he does for our network to exist. And thanks to Doctor Octoroc, who provided the music that you heard before and in just a moment here after the show. I'm That Gamer Priest, Ben, and I hope you enjoy the holiest and happiest of hours. Have a great... I am lost my ability to talk here at the end of the show. Have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you so much for watching. Oh, yeah, don't forget, next week we're back at 5 p.m. Bo Sheldon is the guest, as I mentioned earlier. So come back next week at 5 p.m. And catch... I'm sure that we're going to be talking about safety tools, among many other things. So see you next week, I hope.